out in Ohio. After that, was a summer ball coach with the Torrington Titans in the Futures League. Then went overseas and played a year in Belgium and Australia. Came back, coached in the NECBL with the Plymouth Pilgrims. Then after that, spent a year as an assistant coach at UMass Amherst under Coach Reynolds. And then following that year, joined my dad, who's our head coach here, and have been here ever since, coming up on 2 years now.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you for the time this afternoon to chat through this. Hold on, somebody is saying that they can't hear, although you're coming through here. If you can hear our voices, if you heard Kyle, if you can hear me, could you just click the hand icon over in the GoToWebinar toolbar? Awesome. So it looks like we are coming through. It might be coming through a different speakers that you're looking on for the person that chatted in with that. On a more personal note, I'm really happy to have Kyle on here, not just because he happens to represent a great institution and be a great coach, and somebody that I look to when we think about our college coach partners, but I had the incredible fortune of meeting Kyle about 10 years ago when he was still a high school student athlete, where I coached him for a summer with one of our Head First travel teams, which we used to run, and as a Head First honor roll camper. So being able to follow your career arc, Kyle, has been very, I won't take any credit at all for it. I don't think that'd be fair at all, but it's been really, really gratifying to kind of see your growth through the ranks that year playing professionally abroad. Just really cool to follow. So thank you for that. And thank you for the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was sorry to cut you off. I mean, that was a memorable summer, kind of lifelong friendships. Obviously started with you, I believe. That was just after your junior year at Amherst, correct? You're going into your senior year. And then obviously the Head First connections continued, meeting Corey Spera and having that lifelong bond, and getting to know his dad quite a bit. Guys who took care of me, I was down in D.C. Living with my aunt. It's a cool summer, tough summer. Coach Cronk was a tough guy to play for in a good way. But something I look back upon when I see you guys in those red shirts, and they bring back memories.
And having you in a different shade of red is still gratifying for me. I don't take any offense. And Jeff McGarry from Blast, I'd love it if you could give a quick rundown of kind of what you do, and then an overview, if you're willing, to a bit about kind of Blast and Blast Motion and the sensors, and kind of what your guys' approach to this data analytics is for young ball players.
Sure. First of all, Max, really appreciate you having me on. Kyle, always great to hop on a call with you too, man. So I'm an account manager at Blast Motion, so I work with all of our amateur clients, whether you're a youth travel team or you're a top Division I college. If you come on with a full team package, you're assigned an account manager. We handle anything from training to help with data analysis, planning and implementation, communicating with players and parents, especially during these times, just best practices for training from home, trying to identify what resources you have and then how to best use our technology to paint a picture of that swing and where to go from there. How I got here, I played 4 years at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia as a two-way guy, pitched on the mound as a starter my sophomore year, and then started at first and third my junior and senior years. Had a gig in sales, in tech sales, and 3 years later just stumbled upon this role on LinkedIn, and about a week and a half after that, got the job and recently moved out to San Diego, California from New York City. So now I'm an aspiring professional surfer as well as an account manager at Blast Motion. So what Blast is bat sensor, an online portal, and an app. It's a player development tool that allows players to get insights into different parts of their swing and allows them to kind of work off of those data points. So you don't really have to, if you're going through a player development plan through the fall or through the winter, wait until the season rolls around to really see if you're responding and getting results. You don't have to wait to actually check to see if your batting average went up or down. You can actually use things like bat speed, rotational acceleration, on plane efficiency to see if you're responding to coaches' drills, see if you're responding to the workouts that you're doing in the weight room, see if your strength is increasing, see if you're moving more efficiently, and coaches use that information to tweak plans appropriately, or players use that information to kind of take the reins of their own development at home and use our platform to have drills automatically suggested for them, and then again go along those plans, see if they're responding and see if anything needs to change from there. So definitely a player development tool. We're getting into the recruiting world as well. A lot of MLB teams use us to get more insights into players that they're scouting. A lot of college teams will use it for the same. And then we partner with, obviously, showcases and events like Head First to allow guys to collect some data and be able to help coaches make more informed decisions and help players be able to market themselves.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think that, so this is our first year partnering with Blast for through our programming. So all student athletes who sign up for Honor Roll have the chance to purchase a Blast sensor, and then if they do and they bring it to camp, all that data will be circulated to college coaches like Coach Decker. And I think that even before all this kind of the lockdown, the suspension of seasons, all this kind of stuff happened, we saw a lot of value in delivering this to student athletes so that they can empower themselves on the player development side and also on the recruiting side as well, as you kind of alluded to, Jeff. I think that with everything going on now, it doubles down on some of that because kids don't necessarily have the same access to all of the coaching and all the equipment that they might necessarily have, and so really putting those tools in the hands of student athletes is something that we see a lot of value in as we kind of move through this. The other thing that I'll say is we looked at we've considered every type of technology that there is for our camps, as you might imagine, and one of the things that I really appreciate about what you guys do at Blast is that the education portal and that training platform that you guys have built out with those drills and those videos. So it's focused not just on, collecting this data, but also how does a student athlete use that data and use that insight into who they are as a player to take the next steps towards their development. I think that is incredibly valuable to empower student athletes in their own development. So to kick it in that direction, Kyle, when you guys use Blast with your guys, how do you think about it at the college level from a player development standpoint when you are assessing a kid in the fall or coaching them through the development through the spring? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so for us, we really use Blast a lot in our fall ball season. I'll go ahead and say that's really our player development side. When we get back from the winter break, it's a lot of competition game mode. So we really use Blast that over about that 2-month span in the fall, just breaking stuff down. It was our first year using Blast, so it was kind of a learning experience for me and then our players as well, and just trying to use it properly. I think for us, we really used it primarily off of BP. What we call 21, which is a shortened down machine work off the hack juniors, and we would occasionally use it off of front toss. Just trying to get in that mindset of make sure we're swinging it with intent. We're not using it when those guys are warming up, so because the numbers will get skewed in whatever way. So it's kind of just a growing process and seeing what we had, and it was really just a data collection time where at the end of the fall, I put together a sheet that kind of just had those numbers. It wasn't something we necessarily shared with the players. Just wanted it was more so as a reference to us as a coaching standpoint. But with players coming in and asking, we would have some sit down conversations with them and just trying to take one metric at a time and what one metric we want to work on with one specific guy and just move along that way.
So I think that's an interesting point because I think that there's so much kind of data flooding the game of baseball, and I think that making a key battle for coaches that I see and the coaches we talk with at all levels, travel, high school, college, is making that data useful and usable to drive the next steps. And the other piece is kind of looking at tailored data sets for different kids because at Harvard you probably don't want to, maybe you do, you don't want to have 30 of the same guy as a hitter. And so how do you kind of think about the different pieces of data and how those roll into different player profiles that you're developing?
Yeah. So, I'll just reference the sheet I sent along to you. One of our guys, he's second from the bottom. I don't know if you're going to date it. If you can share
I can pull that up. Yeah.
So a big thing for us, what we start with, really our first week of fall ball when it comes to hitting is just getting guys on plane. Once Max shows that. So this guy's second from the bottom. So if you can see his on-plane efficiency is very good, 95%. But with him, he's not a power guy. He's more of a kind of throwback player, line drive, put the ball on the ground, put pressure on the defense sort of thing. And if you look at his attack angle, it's 3 degrees, which is not necessarily optimal based off like the typical hitter, gap to gap hitter. But with him, it works. He's the type of guy, like we said, don't necessarily want to have him put it on the ground, but he's got to put the ball in play, and that's something he's really good at. So with him, it's not so much getting to get that attack angle up. Yes, we want to get up a little bit more to get more line drives, but we want to like neutralize it because we want to play to his strengths. Like I said, the contact type of hitter. We can always improve upon that with different drills. And I know, Max, you referenced it earlier, just the training portal part of Blast. I mean, that's, talking with Jeff a lot of times, that's something I reference. I think it's the coolest part of Blast where, it's something for me as a coach where when I first got introduced with Blast, I would go in there and look at these drills and go, hey, we have variations of these drills. And, if we want to work on this one specific metric with this guy, it's a great reference just to go right back to it. And it's, it's reinforcing that we're doing the right thing with a certain guy, just trying to work on one specific thing, an aspect of his swing.
Now, not everybody is, including me, quite to be perfectly candid, is completely fluent in this sort of thing. So Kyle, that's really helpful in terms of like how you guys are using this. Jeff, could you give like what are we kind of looking at, and how do you see programs using this to develop their players, and also how do you see individual players? You take one of these data rows and they say, okay, I'm this kid and my bat speed's 59.5 and my attack angle is 3 degrees. How does that kid then use this data? Like what's the data they're looking at, and then how are they using it in their development?
So when you're trying to come up with a development plan for an individual or for a team, there's what the data suggests that I'll get into, but there's also a lot of questions that need to be asked that have been asked forever. What kind of player is this? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? How is he going to best help the team? And how is he going to make the biggest impact offensively? So when you look at Blast's metrics, are 3 not really main metrics, but the ones that we rolled out in 2018 that really took Blast to the next level were on-plane efficiency, your early connection rate impact, so your connection score, and your rotational acceleration. Those, coupled with our other metrics like bat speed, attack angle, and your vertical bat angle, really paint a pretty solid picture of the swing that you can use to help address what type of approach a player should take, what type of pitches they should hunt, and what their makeup is. So we had this new player report come out that we've been plugging pretty frequently, that actually breaks it down into a power category that looks at rotational acceleration and bat speed. Together, on every single swing, where is that plot and where is that in relationship to a major league player? Where do you need to be to actually have that type of power profile? Contact is the second category. So coupled with on-plane efficiency and attack angle, are you direct to the baseball? Are you in the zone? And are you on the pitch? Are you giving yourself multiple points to put that ball in play? So if you execute that very, very frequently, you're not going to be a bunch of a swing and miss guy. You're going to put balls in play. If your attack angle is a little bit flatter, like this dude down here at the bottom with the 59 mile an hour bat speed, for example, he's not going to have the bat speed to be that power guy. So you might want to flatten his attack angle out a little bit, because if he's lifting those balls, he doesn't have the juice to get it over the outfielder's head or over the fence, warning track power. Load efficiency. So that sort of goes along with your on-plane efficiency. If you can't start your swing from the same exact location or same exact relationship between your bat and body, how can you have an efficient path to the baseball, and how can you be an effective player, and how do you have efficient zone coverage up and down in the zone? And then last is connection impact, so the bat-body relationship when you're making contact and your vertical bat angle. So are your bat and body working together to adjust? Can you get to the inside or outside pitch? So with the 2 connection scores together, we're actually doing a pretty good job painting a picture. If you imagine a strike zone or a heat map divided into 9 sections, what pitches should you be hunting? If you're set up for a low and outside fastball and you tell your coach that you're hunting a middle in pitch, well, then you guys might want to sit down and have a conversation about what your approach could be, what your approach should be, and if you want your approach to be a certain way, what adjustments need to take place moving forward. So always ask, though, because if a player thinks he's a power guy, but the data suggests that he needs to work on contact, if we're right before the season do we want to improve his worst category? Do we want to have him making more contact, or we take those swings and misses for a couple extra doubles or a couple big home runs in big moments? Where if it were the fall, we have a lot more time to prepare for the beginning of the season. Maybe we'll chip away at that issue with consistent contact, let the power go on the back burner because he's already got that, and move forward with that plan over the next couple of months. So again, depending on just looking into, again, the type of player you have there, the time of year, what the metrics suggest, that really helps give the coach a lot of information to formulate the best player development plan, and then earlier on in the season, talk to the player about what their approach should be, what type of pitches they should be hunting, and if you're 2-0, what you should be laying off.
Kyle, does that kind of line up with how you're working it? Like using, I think that the power of it that strikes me, and from having conversations with some guys over at Blast, but also with a lot of college coaches about it, is that ability to really custom build something for this kid, and zone in on what is the one metric on this kid's data row that can most impact or can most set them up to be successful with an impact on the field. And it's different for each kid. And that's why kind of like I see the value in this whole battery of data and analytics. Is it's not the same for each kid, as you were mentioning, Jeff, and as you certainly touched on as well, Kyle. Like different things, different key metrics are going to be the one thing that makes the most benefit for one kid, and it won't be for another kid. Is that kind of how you think about it with your hitters, Kyle?
Yeah, and I think with each kid, there's like a different approach to it. Like there's more than one path to getting that approach, where we might concentrate on a certain metric at one time. Obviously, working with Jeff is very, very helpful. He kind of puts the analytics and kind of what I'm looking at on my computer screen into a little bit more language that I can understand. Consider him having like a PhD in it, sort of thing. But there's different paths to it with each kid. So yeah, I mean, we look at one metric and we can kind of tell just based off the eye test. So all these metrics kind of validate what we're seeing. But it also puts into perspective more where, I was looking, as that sheet was up, I was looking at the last kid on that list where, he's got the highest rotational acceleration on our team based off the data we collected last year, which is kind of corresponds to his power ability. But you look at the kid and, he's more known for his speed. He's a burner, he's an outfielder. But that's something we can further now looking at him and looking at these metrics. He's the type of kid that, as his college career goes, he's a freshman now or is finishing up his freshman year. That's something we can better utilize more where, we're probably not going to develop him like we are the kid that I previously talked about. We're gonna rely on him potentially put the ball out of the yard and be more of a gap-to-gap guy. And looking at his attack angle now, like it's pretty good with him. It's just getting him more on plane, which we spent a lot of time doing in the fall. And as he started his freshman year, when he came back from California, being over winter break, something he made a lot of strides with. So for that kid, looking at the last on the list, it was the on plane efficiency for him is what we really honed in on with his drill work.
Now, Jeff, I know you work with a lot of kind of different programs of all types of levels, travel, high school, certainly college programs as well. Is there a pattern success for either kids who are using it as individuals or coaches and programs who are using this, like the cheat sheet to using Blast most effectively within their program to develop their game?
I would say the test and retest model. So you'll have a plan for your team, and you could use Blast to kind of give you a hint in what direction to go in. For example, a trend that I see, and I definitely see the trend, but as far as why this is happening is just a theory of mine. But if you look at that connection and impact column right there, the ideal score is going to be around 90 degrees. It's going to be the strongest position, and whether that pitch is up in the zone or down in the zone, that bat and body should maintain that 90-degree angle. For college rosters, I'll see a handful of guys at 90 degrees. The majority of the team is going to be well under that 90-degree point. And why I think that's happening is for players' entire lives, they're focusing on hitting the opposite way, going and getting the outside pitch, and their bodies are just slowly tilting more and more over home plate, adjusting to efficiently hit that pitch. And now all of a sudden, if someone gets busted up and in, their bodies are super tilted over home plate. They're getting jammed, or the only way they're getting to that pitch is going out and around that baseball. So seeing what the metrics sort of suggest from the team level might help might help guys get their minds going on how they could change different rounds of BP or change their focus offensively, or communicate with the pitching coach. Hey, if our team is really struggling on fastballs up and in, maybe we pitch everybody in the conference that same exact way. Now, as far as at the individual level, the test and retest model, make sure that guys are always making progress and responding to your drills. So you might have 5 guys on your team that struggle with on-plane efficiency, so you roll out a plan for these guys, a series or set of drills for them to go through over the next couple of weeks. If everybody takes 500 swings a week, everybody does the drills as they should, I wouldn't be surprised if 3 or 4 of those guys make progress and 1 or 2 of those guys doesn't. So that's pretty cool that Blast can at least allow the coach in a much shorter period of time ask those questions of why aren't these players responding? What can I change to allow them to improve faster and more efficiently? And how did they learn? Now, I took them through drills. Do they need more hands-on type mechanical adjustments? Do I need to invite them in before practice and do some video analysis with them? Do they need to go to a sports psychologist if they can't take their practice swing, which might be nice and pretty, BP start to in-game? Comparing environments as well really helps the test-retest model to make sure that if guys are making those adjustments in practice, are they actually taking those habits and rolling them out into the game when the pressure's on? So just evaluating week to week, month to month, each guy's metrics to make sure that they're responding to the plans that are in place, to make sure that they're making progress, really allows people to get the most out of the Blast technology and platform.
So
I think sorry to cut you off. I think the point Jeff made was really good, and it's something that I envision us doing too. Is that in-game, that's the difference between BP and then wearing it in-game. It's not something we did in our fall games, and it's not something we did when we came back and began our inter-squad scrimmages in the bubble. But that's definitely a step we should, I envision us taking, just so we can get that differentiation between, all right, his numbers are great, his metrics are great when he's in batting practice in a controlled setting, but once he gets in that game competitive atmosphere, something's out of whack, and it's, like I said, it's probably a head game or an approach mindset sort of thing too. So I think that's an important thing to take into consideration as well as we move forward to Blast in the future.
So, and I'm glad that's exactly what I was going to pick up on as well, Kyle, is that difference between the BP swings versus the truly competitive swings and the different types of feedback that they give. Because I think that, one thing that I talk a lot about with college coaches is, making, without wearing out pitchers' arms and catchers' knees, it's pretty tough to make practice super game-like, right? You to be able to learn and develop, coaches want to introduce a high level of desirable difficulty into practice so that kids can continue to develop. But I know that's a challenge. So Jeff, if you look at a data sheet of BP blast metrics versus in-game, like are you able to tell immediately which is in-game and which is BP, or like what's the difference that you see in that, and also the value that each kind of data set can deliver?
I would not be able to tell which one is in-game or which one's from practice. I would say that probably 50% of your team would be around the same from practice to in-game. 25% of those guys would be much worse off, and 25% of those guys actually like just the adrenaline gets them going. I usually see rotational acceleration numbers fly up from practice to in-game. One account I work with that I want to highlight, actually a conference rival of yours, Kyle, did a phenomenal job tagging practice swings and in-game swings in inter squads in the fall. And he was asking me questions on one of their guys who just rates in batting practice, cannot translate it into a game. When we actually compared his 500 practice swings to his 50 in-game swings, his early connection score of 92 degrees and his connection impact score of 90 degrees went both down to 72 and 70. So it was just really weird that they both took a 20-degree swing south, and just because he doesn't have an efficient load there and he's way bent over home plate at impact, he's going to struggle with his on-plane efficiency because the angles don't really match up, and the way his body has to move with his back shoulder diving in really creates holes on the inner half. So the pull side's pretty much taken away from him, and the way the bat's flattened out early, the down and out pitch is sort of a cold zone form as well. So if that's the first pitch fastball, and then if anybody misses up and out, he'd be okay. But who throws anything up and away, really? So being able to, again, just use the data to ask more questions and come up with fun ideas on how to make practice more game-like. Do we bring the hack attack machine out every other day and just pump 95 up in the zone to put a lot of stress on guys? I go to these ABCA Barnstormers events, and I just thought this is pretty creative. This one pitching coach presented on just trying to make bullpens more game-like, because burying an 0-2 slider in the bottom of the ninth with a runner on third and 2 outs is more difficult than just flipping one over in your bullpen. So he brought out this massive speaker. I was like, oh man, what's this guy doing? And all of a sudden he just clicked the play button, and it was just the sound of this kid just throwing up for 5 minutes straight. And he's got 2 pitchers on the mound he's taking them through their bullpen, taking them through their sequences, taking them through their 0-2s, and they've got to try and focus with this disgusting sound going on in the background. Now, it's a lot different than the environment in the game, but it still is an exercise to take the mind off of the actual task at hand and create some sort of distraction, maybe get some sort of adrenaline going, and they've still got to execute. So I thought that was pretty creative. And if you do see players break down like that, or you have a hunch that guys aren't taking their practice swings in game, then I would suggest to try your best to grab some in-game data on that player and compare the 2 sets side by side.
I've heard of pumping and crowd noise. I've never heard that specific example. That's pretty out there. That's different.
Yeah. Now, what was that player's name? What was that player's name that was struggling with the
that conference rival who's struggling up in the zone?
But yeah, we do a lot of. I mean, one thing we do a really good job of is the machine work. Coach Stark, who's our lead hitting guy here, he really emphasizes machine work where it's done every day, and sometimes it's all machines going and nobody's throwing regular batting practice. I'm in the belief that when you're throwing regular batting practice, you're practicing changeups, which is not what you're going to get in the game. We're in the Ivy League. We're facing really good arms on the weekend where they're 90 plus. So we got to train, and we got to train efficiently for that, to the point where we're making the games almost easier than the practice, where the different distances that we do to train velocity and to train our eyes, it's almost tougher than a game, messing with velocity, then obviously seeing spin and seeing really good spin, just so that when we're in the game, it's easier. So that's something we strive for. And Coach Shark, along with my dad and myself, I think that's something that we really do a good job of in preparing our guys for that sort of what you call it, variable. And then the pumping crowd noise is something we do, but not the actual noise. What we do is we'll do stuff to get guys' heart rate up, where they're doing jumping jacks with 4 round at BP, or doing some sort of ladder drills, just to get that adrenaline going, get that heart rate up. So it's a different way of doing it. Again, maybe we can pump in the crowd noise too, but usually our hitters you listen to their own sort of music during batting practice.
I think that's completely fair. I like that idea of getting the heart rate up before those practice reps, because that kind of the physiological response, that's a big part of what you're looking for. Yep. To tack back to one thing you said earlier, Kyle, that I'm really interested in, or actually I don't remember who, so I'll just kind of throw this out to the group. You mentioned kind of putting data to the eye test, and you see a kid do X, and then you're like, he just, something looks a little off, and he's just, he's coming down on the ball and pounding into the ground, and then you get insight through his attack angle or whatever the case may be. How do you kind of use those two to reinforce each other for current players, but also if you're looking at some kids who are on the younger side, what depth can that give to the perspective that you have on a player that you are watching, if you have the eye test plus this data? Because just looking at this spreadsheet, it might be tough to really get a picture in your mind's eye unless you're really fluent in this data. But if you have this data row, plus you have video, plus you have seen that player live, how do you kind of think about combining all those 3 different modules to get a solid picture of a kid?
So if you pull up this sheet I just sent you before this, so a kid that you think he's better than he's showing, when you look at a kid, so the hitting hierarchy that I kind of test to, it's something that my hitting coach in college was big on, and something I believe in. So the first thing I would look at is a kid on time. I look at rhythm and time as being the first stage of hitting. If you're on time with a pitch, you're going to have a chance to put the ball in play. So, that's usually with a kid that's struggling. Like, all right, is he getting his load and getting his body in a good spot with a load where he's on time with the pitch? If that check mark is right, then all right, then it's probably let's go to approach. Is he trying to be something that he's not? Is he understanding the situation at hand? Is he struggling with that? If you trust that his mind is right, his approach is right, then we'll look into more of a mechanical or I have athleticism down there. I would stay away from that for now, but just then I would look at it as a mechanical problem. So I think it's like a 3-stage sort of process before you start necessarily tinkering with a swing. Yes, you're making a little bit of adjustments here and there every day in practice, but we're not making, we're not all of a sudden going to have a kid who starts his hand here. Oh, it's a mechanical thing, needs to start hand lower. It's not something we're going to go to right away. Like I said, I think the kid that's struggling, you're going to start by thinking if he's on time or not. Then, what's his mindset with his approach? And then we look into the more mechanical adjustment sort of thing. And that's in my opinion. I'm sure other guys look at it differently, but that's what I kind of attest to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and if you do get to that mechanics section with somebody, players nowadays have to ask why. They won't just take the coach's word for it anymore. So it really helps to be able to back it up with data. And then for the player as well, if you do decide to move somebody's hands back, you might move them back an inch, but to that player, because their body's so used to moving in a certain way and starting in a certain position, that tiny adjustment seems like you're yanking their hands way, way, way back behind their head. And I know as a hitter, if I make any sort of tiny adjustments with my hands, I might, if I'm working off the tee, just drill the next 2 or 3 balls right into the ground and make massive divots right there in the infield. But if I can look back at a tool like Blast that can actually track biomechanical changes and see that while on the field, that result didn't look too favorable, if the technology tells me that I'm actually working in the right direction, that can help me be a little more at ease and believe that these adjustments are going to help me in the long run. And it's just a matter of training my body to move a little bit differently before those results will actually come. So it can be a little less frustrating for players making those adjustments as well if they can actually see that progress in real time.
I think
100%.
And on two sides, that on the input and the output, I think that like being able to say, hey kid, we're moving your hands back an inch because of this, and pointing to some of those metrics as a why for this adjustment, and then also using them to say like, look, we need to kind of preach patience here, because no, it didn't work out with these first 2 swings, but the whole picture that we're getting from you says that this is working in the right direction. So it's almost like the explanation on both ends to make a kid trust that process.
Yeah, and I think there's other ways you can do it where you don't necessarily put it into a mechanical thing. Looking at like attack angle specifically, so again, I'll highlight the kid. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 down. His attack angle is 9. With him, like kind of a cue I've given for him, and it's something I learned this past offseason, like trying to want to think of yourself as like a Ferris wheel type of hitter, right? Going down to up, as opposed to maybe a merry-go-round hitter where he's kind of cutting his swing off. That'll make that attack angle be a little lower, and you're not getting that good lift on the ball. So like we'll put a mechanical adjustment into an approach-based mindset that's might be more beneficial for that kid. So he's not thinking about, oh, I got to drop my hands this way or not do this. It's a different approach to things. There's a different way of teaching it, and it'll help different kids different ways. Jeff talked about the hands here. Like, and I was the type of hitter, my hands were right by my ears, and and a hitting coach tell me, like, if you move your hands back, you start making that rubber band effect. That's going to create like more bat speed through the zone, and 1 inch feels like 6, and 3 inches feels like a mile, sort of thing. So like it's a tough adjustment, and you got to understand like there's a timetable for it. Where my hitting coach was very smart and not tell me it during the season. He went into our postseason kind of like assessment, like, hey, let's work on getting your hands back just a little bit more. That way you can create more acceleration through the zone to get a little more oomph out of the bat, sort of
thing. A question again, I think that I would toss out for both of you, that because this is a conversation that I had I guess about a month and a half ago or so. I talked with Chris Gordon, the Duke assistant coach, who has such a big role in kind of their data and analytics programming. And the question that came to mind that I think is really interesting for high school kids is, yes, like this is an incredibly valuable tool to help you develop as a player, and for coaches, an incredibly valuable tool to help them develop the players who are kind of in their purview and in their program. The other side of it that he spoke to that I thought was really interesting was, using data from kids who are currently in the program to kind of project that kid back into the recruiting cycle. So if you have a current junior who has the blast metrics look like this and the batted ball velocity looks like this, and you kind of know what this player looks like, how do you kind of longitudinally track that kid and say, all right, this kid who's a junior, I'm not going to find this size and strength in a high school sophomore or junior, but what did this kid who is now a college junior, what did he look like when he was a sophomore or junior? And I think that as more programs use tools like blasts in their day-to-day with their current players, they're getting this kind of longitudinal. They're getting their freshmen on it. They're getting some of the kids who come to their prospect camps on tools like Blast, and so they're starting to build this picture. Are you guys thinking about it like that, or are you guys seeing some of that on like kind of funneling backwards into the recruiting side of things as well?
I think time will tell. I think that's a neat way of looking at it. It's once you get into, I mean, I haven't been in the college coaching business very long, but hearing other older coaches talk, and even hearing Coach Stark talk about how this guy is very similar to this guy who's in our program or was in our program a little bit before, and you're never trying to replace a guy to make sure he's that guy, but the different the similarities you see, they don't go unnoticed, and I think time will tell because we didn't have those metrics when those kids were in high school. But it's another way with video to potentially project them, sort of thing.
And I mentioned this yesterday. It was just a story and how I kind of suggest looking at some things when we were preparing for this. But if you have a player who in high school is really filled out, 6'2", 215, who's got some juice because he's got that speed, but lacks rotation, you might want to actually gravitate towards the guy who's 6'2", 160, who just has rotational acceleration through the roof, because that's a gift. And now, if you have confidence in your weight coach and your nutritionist at school at the next level, and if he goes on to play in college, to pack 30, 40 pounds on the kid, get his bat speed up, keep his rotation where it is, that's a huge gain, and that's big from a development standpoint as well. You also might figure to realize that your staff is really good at improving certain areas of the swing or certain metrics. So you can sacrifice you can take a player that has a deficiency in a certain category, or target a player that has a deficiency in a certain category while they excel in other areas, knowing that over the first couple of years at that school, he'll be able to improve this area of his swing because that's what you guys are experts at. So you might want to, again, use the data to make some more informed decisions on that front.
I think that point about kind of like recruiting to coaching staff strengths is also something that hadn't really occurred to me before last summer when I had some conversations with college coaches, and they're like, look, I need to recruit a kid because I can't help them do X, but I can really help them do Y. So if they are at my level, like the level that I need to compete in my conference with this one skill, but they're below average in this other, I know that I can get that up. Now, right now, I think there's a lot, like they watch them play and they kind of look at some of the output. They look at the batted ball velocity, they look at the throwing velocity, they look at, fastball max velocity, whatever it is. They're looking at some of that. I think this gives them a sense of what the inputs that they need to address to get there. If they see a kid who's throwing 87 and they're like, I know that in my program, because of whatever he's doing with his arm, I'm going to get that kid to 92, 93, and he's going to be a weekend starter for me just because I know that he's going to have those tools because that's what I can develop.
Yeah, I think the kind of the go-to thing is like, all right, like at least in like the recruiting world, like, oh, you say the kid is raw. He's raw, but he's throwing 87. Oh, give him some teaching, some coaching, excuse me, and that should get it up, sort of thing.
Yeah, or I was going to mention if you have a guy that's throwing 95, can't hit the broad side of the barn, maybe you guys specialize in really dialing in his accuracy. So you'll target guys with a high velocity, low consistency, low accuracy versus the guy who's pretty dialed in but needs to still make some gains in velocity. It all depends on what you guys are best at.
So it's such an interesting, I think we're in a very interesting time in the game of baseball because the focus on stats and metrics and all these technological tools at the pro level is really starting to filter down to the college level because of accessible things like Blast or some, things that some sort of systems that have previously had to be built into stadiums are now portable. And being able to deliver this to college programs, I think really can can help on the player development side and also help on identifying the right kids for that program side. Because one thing that I think about specifically with the programs that we work with, the Harvards of the world, the Ivy League schools of the world, the NESCAC schools of the world, they're not going to get that 5-tool recruit because that kid's committed to, Mississippi State, right? The kid who's going to be able to hit at 470 feet as a junior in high school or a sophomore in high school, they're making some other decisions earlier down the road before some of these high academic programs that we work with are able to make some of these moves. So looking for the areas of development and being able to put some data and metrics and video and resources behind, here's where I can identify where I can develop this player or my coaching staff can develop this player, because I know I have a much better picture of kind of what's going on.
Yeah, I think, in regard to, just Harvard, you mentioned those kids that are going to Mississippi State. This is kind of the only thing I'll say when it comes to recruiting is like we're recruiting a different type of kid. And that's kind of like where I'll stay with that, where it goes far beyond baseball for us. Yes, we're trying to get the most talented baseball players we can, but there's a lot of boxes, and it's not just baseball ability to be checked when it comes to putting on the crimson uniform.
1000%.
I've always been confused at why if you have the grades, I don't know why the Ivy League isn't just an absolute powerhouse in every single sport. I mean, I'm biased. I played the 4 best years of my life. I played some great baseball. Played against some great competition, and I mean, the facilities are great too. So I don't know why. Playing baseball in the Northeast kind of stinks. I remember pitching at Cornell in late April and it started snowing when I was on the mound. But man, the education that you can get and the level of competition is so good. I don't know why everybody doesn't have an Ivy League school, at least if you have the grades towards the top of your list. Little Ivy League plug there.
Absolutely, and yeah, I feel
the
same way about it.
The pitching in the Ivy League is, those weekend guys. In my opinion, those guys are, those weekend stars, especially those Saturday guys that, they're Power 5 arms in my opinion. Just in terms of being able to compete at that level, maybe a different role, but those are potential pro guys, sort of thing.
But they're. I mean, the way that, quite frankly, just a little off topic from the data analytics side of things, but the way that we think about the recruiting process and the college fit process is like, yes, you want to play baseball at the highest level that you can, because it's going to offer the right opportunities for growth and development. And it's going to be the most rewarding for you. But ultimately, what you're thinking about at the next level is, okay, when my baseball career ends, whenever that is, whether it's after high school, after 4 years in college, after a year playing abroad professionally, after 13 years in the big leagues, whatever it is, what's next, and how has this 4-year experience helped me transition to the rest of my life after that as well? And so we think a lot about, and I know I've talked about this with you before, Kyle, as well. We think about holistic fit, and so like that side of things, like I think more kids that can hit the ball 500 feet should be going to the Ivy League. To echo Jeff's point, like if they have those grades, there's no better opportunity than I think to play at some of these schools, whether notwithstanding. I'm a kid from the Northeast, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, our guys are very mature in how they look at that stuff. I think that's why. Looking at, just a head first program, we that's where we go looking for potential prospects. Our guys are baseball players. They have aspirations to play pro baseball. I think I could ask anyone in that locker room, what they want to do as soon as they graduate. But they also have a bigger picture and plan. And I think a lot of their bigger purpose in life is going to exceed just being a baseball player. Could still be in baseball, obviously well represented, just Harvard alums in baseball front offices. But it's bigger than just baseball for them, but they take it very, very seriously, just like they do all aspects of their college life.
Quick question for you, Jeff, kind of more tackle that did come in through the Q&A section is, when you work with a program, kind of does every program, each kid has their own sensor? Like how does that generally work and work best, or to set each kid up but also the program up for success within the Blast platform?
What's most important is that everybody has a profile that allows you to organize all the data, and Jeff's swings go with Jeff, Kyle's are with Kyle, and Max's are with Max. Without the player profile, if all 3 of our swings were combined into one hodgepodge of whatever. There's no insight to be really had there whatsoever, except maybe a quick suggestion on what the team should work on. As far as sensors go, you can share sensors, which the workflow there is fairly simple. You just need to have a coach account there and select what player's using what sensors. Just a couple of taps on an app, pretty easy to organize. The best way, though, is if everybody has their own sensor. That way you can capture swings online. As a coach, you can access any player's swings in real time. So if you're hitting with 4 guys at 4 different stations, you can make sure Jeff's executing. You can make sure Kyle and Max are executing too at their respective stations. And you can also capture the swings in offline mode. The sensors can store up to 1,000 swings, and you can upload those later on. So both models have their positives and negatives. With the sharing sensor model, obviously you save some on cost. You still get all the power of the profile and all the reporting features. You won't be able to collect as many swings as quickly. But again, if it's not in your budget to grab a sensor for everybody, it's a great option. And then with sensors for everybody, it's just a practice as usual. Make sure the sensor's charged, pop it on your bat, take it off your bat if you're doing any drills. But it'll record everything that happens that day. The coach can access any player's swing in real time.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what we do. Every player, every position player in our program has their own sensor. We primarily use it offline, where I'm usually throwing batting practice from beginning to end. So we're not necessarily using the live mode a ton of times. I will sometimes, if we're looking for just on-plane efficiency, like that first 2 weeks, I'll have it there just to look at. But typically we just use it offline mode. But every position player has their own sensor.
I do think so. One thing that we had talked about yesterday that I'll kind of touch on. I know we're coming towards the end of our time. I want to make sure we're respecting everybody's time. What I think is really interesting in particular about tools like Blast right now is when you don't have access to the coach, it kind of allows continued development remotely by having this data set that you're able to kind of pass along. And so Kyle, I'm curious for, when the season was suspended, but your team was still kind of more in season, in the March, April range. Was that helpful? How did you kind of continue to work with your team through tools like this or video or kind of working that remote? Because I think that's useful in terms of thinking about as a prospective student athlete or as a high schooler, how I can develop being not necessarily day-to-day, face-to-face with my coach.
Yeah, I think it's pretty invaluable. So I guess there's a couple parts to that question. The one thing we did is once they got back from winter break, we actually put the sensors away. From time to time, one of the players had asked me if I could use it. Those are a couple of guys that really gravitated towards it. So I'd look at it, but it wasn't a daily regimen sort of thing for us. I think with the quarantine and its impact on the lack of summer ball, it's a potential way to just keep training. Now there's obviously, we can't work with our guys, so there's obviously some loops we got to go through to potentially do that and potentially, I guess, hopefully send stuff away. But again, it's a compliance thing we got to work with. But no, for high schools, I think it's an invaluable tool. I believe it's it's a low cost thing. And something I've told our infielders where, it's 15 to 20 minutes. I primarily work with our infielders here. It's my first coaching responsibility, I guess. But with working with them, like, hey, 15 to 30 minutes a day, it's going to mean it's going to make a big difference at the end of this thing. And it's towards your baseball craft, and, you're not asking a lot where, 15 to 30 minutes in one day, 7 days a week, is a lot better than, throwing a ball against the wall for an hour, 2 days a week. You get more out of it. And when you turn that into the hitting thing, I think it's really invaluable. You talk about, guys like Derek Jeter, where he would go home. He talks about 10,000 hours, I believe, in his book, where he dedicated towards hitting or just baseball in general, where he'd go home in between lunch and just work off a tee. Now, imagine how good Derek Jeter might have been as a hitter if he had a blast motion sensor and was able to look at that every time. So if you have that mindset and plan, like, I think the blast motion sensor is going to do so much good in terms of improving your game. There's like a podcast, webinar sort of thing I actually listened to. It's infield related, but it's a guy that I've learned a lot of infield stuff from, and he talks about how, like, he gave his nephews a plan. He didn't force them to do it. He gave his nephews a plan to be good, and it was on his nephews to execute that plan and to make it a daily part of their routine. And from everything, I've never seen his nephews play, but based on the programs they're going to, and they're pretty good players. So like that sort of thing, like the coaches can only do so much. We can give you a plan, but we're not taking the swings for you. It's on you to really improve your game.
Yeah, and I think that consistency piece that you touched on, Tyler, I think Kyle, is so valuable, right? And it's not just 10,000 hours. It's like 10,000 hours of dedicated practice. How do I introduce difficulty into these reps? How am I gaining meaningful feedback from these reps? And that's kind of where I see tools like Blast really equipping young ball players to have an incredible kind of development arc from where they are to where they're going, which I'm terrible at assessing, but I know, coaches like you, Kyle, are better at looking at a kid who's 16 and saying, here's kind of how I project him out. But I think that arc really stands to accelerate with tools like Blast because of the meaningful feedback that you're able to gather. It's not just where did the ball go? It's what was my approach? What was the input that created that result? And how can I address the root cause of some of these things instead of taking a mechanical, guessing at a mechanical tweak and seeing what it does. It's kind of helps you make more sure-footed steps down that path, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have all the answers when it comes to Blast. I lean on Jeff a lot, very heavily when it comes to looking at our individual players. Where, like I said previously, like he's got the PhD on this, and I'm kind of just trying to learn as much as I can and to see how it helps, every one of our players in a different way. So I'm sure, based off what he said earlier with the account management, having an account manager for every team thing, if your team's hooked on it, you have a great resource through your coach to work with you, basically one-on-one.
We're just about at the end. I do want to end with kind of one question to each of you, because I think that mostly our audience is, high school ball players who are looking to continue to develop their game and make the next step. So, Jeff, what's the top piece of advice that you would give to a high school student athlete right now who might be dealing with some restrictions or their remote classrooms, their seasons were suspended, they're under different varying levels of stay-at-home orders? What's the piece of advice that you kind of talk through with the programs that you work with and the players that, if you were coaching a program, what would you say to that player?
Keep working. As far as we know, the season's right around the corner. If you're trying to get recruited, you're going to have a really short recruiting cycle coming up. If normally, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but May to August. Now, if it's going to be like mid-July to late August, or if they push it back into the fall, that's a tight window. There's a lot on the college coaches to prepare for that tight window. There's going to be a lot of players that they have to see. So the more proactive you can be in reaching out and getting your name out there, sharing statistics, transcripts, GPA, all of that helps these guys kind of build that pipeline and allows them to walk into these showcases with more of a plan on the names they want to see, where they're playing, and who to contact if you impress. So, don't stop training, and two, if you're trying to get recruited and trying to play at the next level, be proactive in getting your own name out there, and don't be afraid to market yourself.
Kyle, same question to you. What's your piece of advice for that high school student athlete who's at home right now?
Yeah, I would echo basically everything Jeff just said. I think it's also a unique time to train because all those, kind of outside school distractions, they're not going on right now. So you almost embrace, I look at it from like just the athleticism piece, like infield piece specifically, like, find a wall, get a couple of tennis balls or whatever and throw it at and work on your hands. Start jump roping sort of thing. It's a weird time because all these distractions are gone, but it could be potentially the most ideal time to really work on your craft and, obviously study hard. That's the most important thing. But there's only so much don't make this like a proactive time, not woe is me, I can't do this, I can't do that. Well, there's plenty of things you can do as it relates directly to baseball, and take this on as a me time to really just get better at your craft.
I think key point is it's so easy to focus on the stuff you can't do. You don't have access to the full spring season. You don't have access to the weight room that you usually train in. Guess what? Baseball players for a long time didn't have the level of stuff that even you do right now. So doing what you can with what you can and being creative, but really just keeping the feet moving is something that that we talk about a lot. And I know that, that you guys certainly touched on as well.
I think I guess maybe to throw one thing, it's almost like embracing the uncool aspects of being a baseball player. Like, I don't know, like when I was in high school, I would drive to the cage right by my right by my high school baseball field. And I hit off there for hours. People might have thought that was strange, but that's what I like to do, and I think it paid off in the long run. I guess if I had a blast motion sensor, hopefully it would have paid off a little more. But like things I didn't do, like jump rope or really get in the weight room enough, or do those 100 push-ups a day, or do those sit-ups and different things. Something you can do. Kind of looking back on it, maybe I should have done more of it. But it's the time to really do it.
Yeah. On behalf of Head First, Jeff, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on this. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Really appreciate the time and the thought, and I don't think there are two better people in the world to have on this, talking through some of this data and analytics and how to use it from a development standpoint. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you
for having me, Max.
Really appreciate it, man.